You've probably felt it, right? That knot of anxiety, that wave of sadness, and someone, somewhere, probably told you, just put a name on it. It's this really simple, comforting idea that if you can just label a feeling, you can get a handle on it. And, we hear this piece of advice everywhere.
Yeah, this little phrase, name it to tame it, it's become a huge deal in modern emotional wellness. And it's not just some old wives' tale. For years, it's been backed up by a whole lot of research, all suggesting that the simple act of putting our emotions into words, well, it can have some real powerful effects.
And let's be real, it just feels right, doesn't it? There's a ton of evidence for it. I mean, you look at studies on expressive writing, for example. They've shown again and again that writing about your feelings can seriously reduce distress. It really does seem like a straight shot to feeling better.
But what if, and this is a big what if under certain circumstances, naming your feeling doesn't actually tame it? What if it traps it? What if slapping a label on your emotion actually makes it harder to move on?
Okay, so let's get into this because this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Some recent research has uncovered a major twist in how we understand this whole labeling your feelings thing. So a study published in the journal Effective Science decided to put this mantra to the test directly. The researchers, they wanted to know, does naming an emotion actually help you regulate it, especially if you try to change your perspective right afterwards? And the experiment they set up was just brilliantly simple. They showed people a bunch of negative images and split them into 4 groups. Okay, so group 1, they were just told to look at the images. Group 2 had to name the emotion they were feeling. Group 3 was told to reappraise, basically to come up with a new story about the picture to make themselves feel better. And that 4th group, they had to do both. First, name the emotion, then reappraise. The whole goal was to see which strategy was the best at making people feel less bad. And the results? Well, they were not at all what you'd think. All right, just take a look at this. Way over on the left, the group that only reappraised, the ones just changing their story, they saw a big drop in how bad they felt. Now look at the middle. When people named their emotion first, reappraisal barely did anything at all. And get this, just naming the emotion by itself actually made people feel a tiny bit worse. So what on earth is going on here? Well, the researchers came up with this idea they call the crystallizing effect. The theory is that when you slap a simple label like sad or angry onto a really complex experience, you might actually be locking it in place. You've solidified that initial take, making your brain less flexible and way less able to come up with a new, more helpful way of looking at things. Now, this doesn't mean we should just, stop paying attention to our feelings. Not at all. It just means we need a better tool. And this brings us to a much more sophisticated skill, moving beyond just labeling to something called emotional granularity. So emotional granularity, it's basically emotional expertise. It's the ability to make these really fine-grained distinctions in how you feel. Think of it as seeing all the specific shades and textures of your emotional world, not just the primary colors. And this just lays it out so perfectly. Affect labeling is like a blunt instrument. It just says, I feel bad. But emotional granularity, that's a surgical tool. It says, I feel exhausted and lonely. Labeling says, I feel angry. Granularity says, I feel resentful and agitated. You can just immediately feel how that more precise description gives you so much more information about what's really going on and what you might actually need. And look, this is way more than just using fancier words. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how you understand your own inner experience. It lets you have more specific, more effective responses instead of just defaulting to the same old one-size-fits-all reaction. So you might be thinking, okay, but how is that even possible? Aren't my feelings just my feelings? Well, it's possible because of a really modern understanding of what emotions actually are. Turns out they're not nearly as fixed as we think. So according to something called the theory of constructed emotion, your feelings aren't just passive reactions to the world. They are active constructions. Your brain is constantly making predictions, trying to make sense of sensations based on everything you've ever experienced. And what that means is that you have a role in building your own emotional reality. And what's absolutely incredible is how this cutting-edge psychological theory lines up with ideas from Buddhist philosophy that are centuries old. Both traditions pretty much agree. Our mental states are constructed. They're built out of concepts. And because they're built, they can be transformed.
We can literally learn to revise the concepts we use to build our experience of the world.
So here's the absolute key takeaway. Precise language isn't just for describing your emotions, it's a tool for constructing them. The words you use become the actual raw materials your brain uses to build a more nuanced, a more manageable, and ultimately a more helpful emotional life.
Okay, so that brings us to the really practical side of things. How can you actually get better at this? How do you develop this emotional granularity and build this kind of emotional expertise? Well, we can actually learn from traditions that have been honing this very skill for millennia. Contemplative practices, like mindfulness, they offer a direct roadmap for cultivating exactly this kind of fine-grained self-awareness.
Let's look at 4 key skills here. First up is acceptance. That's just observing your feelings without judging them, instead of trying to push them away. Second, we have decentering. This is the amazing skill of noticing your feelings without becoming them. You create a little bit of space. Third is noting. You mentally tag experiences as they happen, not with a big label like sad, but with more detail, like a feeling of worry, or the act of planning, or a sensation of pain. And finally, deification. This is seeing that your thoughts and feelings are just mental events. They're not objective reality. They're constructions.
So, name it to tame it isn't exactly wrong, it's just incomplete. By moving past those simple, broad labels, we can trade in that one blunt instrument for a whole toolkit of surgical tools. And that lets us navigate our inner world with so much more skill and precision and wisdom. And that really leaves us with a powerful question to think about. The next time you have a difficult feeling, instead of rushing to slap a single word on it, what might you discover if you just paused, got a little curious, and simply described the rich, complex landscape of your actual experience?